One, I've been impressed this morning to pray for healing. As a part of my ministry, healing is one of the things that God has called me to. And so I just want to spend just a few minutes with you in prayer concerning healing.
January 8th, 2018, 11:47 a.m. A bank employee steps out for lunch and vanishes forever. But this wasn't a random disappearance. This was calculated murder, carried out by the one person who should have protected her most. The man who killed Tanisha Harris wasn't a stranger lurking in shadows. He was her husband, her spiritual leader, her supposed protector. The man who strangled his wife to death was the same man church members called when they needed spiritual guidance. Robert Lee Harris held the sacred title of church elder at Repairs, Kansas City. When congregants faced their darkest moments, they turned to him for counsel. When they needed prayer, they sought his wisdom. When they needed trust, they gave him everything. When police arrived at their Overland Park apartment that afternoon, the scene told a horrifying story. Red stains soaked deep into the carpet where Tanisha had fought for her life. Shattered glass scattered across the floor like deadly confetti. The air hung heavy with violence and death. Robert sat alone among the wreckage, calm and collected, as if nothing had happened, as if his wife of 18 months hadn't just been brutally murdered in their home. Hours later, this same man picked up his phone and dialed 911. With chilling composure, he reported his wife missing. The same hands that had just strangled the life from her body now trembled with fake concern as he spoke to dispatchers. He knew exactly where she was. He had wrapped her lifeless body in garbage bags and dumped her in a field 20 miles away. What if your spiritual leader, your trusted counselor, was capable of this? What if the person you confided your deepest secrets to, the one you believed spoke directly to God, was planning your destruction? Tanisha Harris trusted completely. She believed in the sanctity of marriage, in the power of faith, in her husband's love. If you've ever trusted someone completely, you need to watch this entire video, because the warning signs were there, and by the end, you'll know exactly what to look for. Hit that notification bell, because this could literally save your life or someone you love. Don't scroll away thinking this could never happen to you. Tanisha thought the same thing. He spent the morning buying the tools for murder, then calmly went to church. While Tanisha prepared for what she thought was just another ordinary day, Robert was at Walmart purchasing garbage bags, carpet cleaner, and a filleting knife. The premeditation will shock you. Repairs, Kansas City stood as more than just a church. It was a sanctuary where broken lives found healing and lost souls discovered purpose. This non-denominational congregation in South Kansas City prided itself on authentic faith and genuine community. Members didn't just attend services. They formed a spiritual family bound by shared beliefs and mutual support. The church's name reflected its mission, repairing what life had damaged, restoring what circumstances had destroyed. In this sacred space, two hearts would meet, fall in love, and create what everyone believed was a perfect Christian marriage. Tanisha Harris commanded respect the moment she stepped into any room. As associate minister at Repairs, Kansas City, she wielded her spiritual authority with grace and compassion that touched every life she encountered. Her voice carried power when she preached, yet remained gentle when she counseled those in pain. Congregants sought her wisdom during their darkest hours, knowing she would listen without judgment and offer guidance rooted in genuine love. At 38 years old, Tanisha had mastered the delicate balance between strength and tenderness. Her colleagues described her as soft-spoken yet powerful, sweet yet commanding. She possessed that rare quality of making everyone feel heard and valued. When she spoke about faith, people believed. When she prayed over troubled souls, miracles seemed possible. Her presence alone brought comfort to a community that desperately needed healing. Beyond the pulpit, Tanisha lived as a devoted mother to her precious daughter. She had built a beautiful life before Robert entered her world, balancing her demanding role as associate minister with the joys and challenges of single motherhood. Her daughter was her pride and joy, the light that illuminated every corner of her existence. Tanisha worked diligently at a local bank, managing her professional responsibilities while nurturing her calling to ministry. She understood sacrifice, having poured herself into both careers to provide for her family and serve her community. Her colleagues at the bank knew her as reliable and kind, while church members witnessed her unwavering dedication to God's work. She had created stability and purpose in her life, building a foundation strong enough to welcome love when it finally arrived at her doorstep. Tanisha's influence extended far beyond Sunday morning services. She became the heartbeat of Repairs Kansas City, the person everyone turned to when life became overwhelming. Young mothers sought her advice on raising children in faith. Struggling couples found hope through her marriage counseling. Teenagers discovered their worth through her youth mentorship programs. Her impact rippled through the entire congregation like waves of healing water. When families faced financial hardship, Tanisha organized relief efforts. When members battled illness, she coordinated prayer chains and meal deliveries. Her phone rang constantly with calls from people who simply needed someone to listen, someone who cared enough to pray with them through their storms. She didn't just preach about love and service. She lived it daily, transforming lives through her genuine compassion and unwavering faith in God's goodness. Robert Lee Harris held one of the most respected positions within Repairs Kansas City, church elder. At 35 years old, he commanded trust and reverence from every member of the congregation. When Pastor Funderburk was unavailable, Robert stepped seamlessly into leadership, guiding the flock with apparent wisdom and spiritual maturity. His title carried weight that extended beyond Sunday services into the daily lives of church members. Congregants viewed him as their spiritual counselor, the man they could approach with their deepest struggles and most private confessions. He offered guidance during marriage crises, provided comfort during times of loss, and served as a beacon of hope for those lost in darkness. Members like Hope Lizette considered him their go-to person for spiritual emergencies. His voice carried authority when he spoke about faith, family, and the sacred bonds of marriage. Everyone trusted Elder Robert Harris completely. Love bloomed across distance when Robert and Tanisha first connected. Pastor Funderburk later recalled how their correspondence sparked romance that burned bright despite the miles between them. Their long-distance relationship deepened through countless phone calls and heartfelt letters. Robert eventually relocated primarily for her, abandoning his previous life to pursue their fairy tale love story. Pastor Carlton Funderburk beamed with joy when he recalled their beautiful love story. He had the privilege of performing their wedding ceremony in July 2016, watching two souls unite in what appeared to be perfect harmony. In his eyes, they represented everything a Christian marriage should embody: faith, commitment, and genuine affection.
Local church is devastated after one of their workers is killed, and police say the suspect is her husband.
The church told us he also worked there. 41 Action News reporter Andres Gutierrez live at the church tonight with more. Andres.
Robert Harris and the victim, his wife Tanisha Harris, first met here at this church where they did work together. Tonight, members of this church are still struggling to come with grips with what's happened so far.
This loss is profound and utterly indescribable.
Pastor Carlton Funderburk is today working to comfort his congregation at Preparers Kansas City as they mourn the death of 38-year-old Tanisha Harris. Police discovered her body overnight in this Raymore field, miles away from her home in Overland Park.
There's no way to even wrap one's mind around that, to even see that that would be in the realm of the possible. It doesn't seem real. It seems like a very bad nightmare.
Police tell 41 Action News officers initially went to Harris's apartment Monday afternoon after her husband called to report a disturbance. He was home alone at the time. Hours later, the husband once again called police, this time to report Harris missing. Officers say they became suspicious of the 30-year-old man after their interview. During further questioning, he admitted to police he had a role in his wife's disappearance.
I am coming on. I've been impressed this morning to pray for healing. So as a part of my ministry, healing is one of the things that God has called me to. And so I just want to spend just a few minutes with you in prayer concerning healing. I'm on my way to work, but I'm definitely going to pray today. So come on in the room. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. we're going to pray today, because I believe God is going to heal you today, because you have to make a conscious decision that you will be healed. And today is your day. I believe that today is your day for healing. So I'm going to pray. So as you come on in, invite someone, and we're going to pray. I'm not going to delay the time. Give me just a moment. I'll say.
They were just good, solid people and outstanding members of their community. Funderburk would later reflect with heartbreak in his voice. The couple never displayed any signs of relationship problems or marital discord. Their love seemed authentic, their commitment unwavering. To everyone who witnessed their union, Robert and Tanisha Harris appeared blessed by God himself, destined for a lifetime of happiness together in holy matrimony. January 8th, 2018 began like any other Monday morning for Tanisha Harris. She woke in the Overland Park apartment she shared with Robert, completely unaware that these would be her final hours on earth. Her morning routine followed its familiar pattern: coffee, prayer, preparation for another day serving both God and her banking career. Tanisha moved through her home with the quiet confidence of a woman who had found her place in the world. She had her ministry responsibilities at Repairs Kansas City, her demanding job at the bank, and a marriage she believed was blessed by heaven itself. As she prepared for work that morning, choosing her outfit and gathering her belongings, death was already planning its visit. Her husband was already calculating her murder. At the bank, Tanisha had earned respect as a dedicated professional who balanced her career with her calling to ministry. Her colleagues knew her as reliable, punctual, and genuinely caring about both customers and coworkers. She approached her banking responsibilities with the same integrity she brought to her spiritual duties. That Monday morning proceeded normally. Tanisha handled transactions, assisted customers, and managed her daily responsibilities without any indication of the horror awaiting her. When lunchtime approached, she followed her usual routine, stepping away from her desk for a well-deserved break. Her co-workers expected her return within the hour. None of them realized they were witnessing her final moments as a living, breathing woman walking out those bank doors. When Tanisha failed to return from lunch, alarm bells began ringing throughout her workplace. This wasn't like her at all. Tanisha Harris was the epitome of reliability. She didn't disappear without explanation, didn't abandon her responsibilities, and certainly didn't leave people wondering about her whereabouts. Her absence felt wrong from the very first minute she was overdue. Bank colleagues started making phone calls, checking with anyone who might know her location. Worry spread quickly through the building as hours passed without word from their missing co-worker. Meanwhile, at Repairs Kansas City, church members began receiving the devastating news that their beloved associate minister had vanished. The woman who had never failed to show up for others had simply disappeared into thin air. Fear gripped both communities as they realized something terrible had happened to Tanisha Harris. As afternoon turned to evening, the terrible reality began settling over everyone who knew Tanisha. This wasn't a case of running errands or getting caught up in unexpected business. Something catastrophic had occurred. The woman who lived her life with clockwork precision, who never left people guessing about her whereabouts, had completely vanished. Her daughter waited anxiously for her mother's familiar voice on the phone. Church members gathered in prayer circles, begging God for her safe return. Bank supervisors contacted authorities, knowing in their hearts that Tanisha would never voluntarily abandon her post. The silence from her phone felt deafening. Her absence created a void that grew more terrifying with each passing hour. Meanwhile, Robert Harris sat in their apartment, surrounded by evidence of violence, preparing to play the role of concerned husband. Evil was masquerading as love. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right? That instinct that screams danger even when everything appears normal on the surface? Drop a comment and tell us about your intuition experiences, because what happened next proves why we should always trust our instincts. Tanisha's friends and colleagues felt that overwhelming sense of dread, that knowing in their bones that tragedy had struck. Their intuition was screaming the truth while Robert prepared his lies. Sometimes our subconscious picks up on warning signs our conscious mind hasn't processed yet. Sometimes that uncomfortable feeling in your stomach is your soul trying to protect you from evil hiding behind a familiar face. That same afternoon, while Tanisha's colleagues worried about her absence. Neighbors at the Overland Park apartment complex heard something that made their
At first,
blood run
no
cold.
motive was suggested
Loud,
early
violent
on
noises
in the
erupted
case,
from the Harris
but during the
residence.
trial,
Sounds of
jurors
struggle,
received
breaking
testimonies
glass,
from the
what
family
could
and
only
church
be
members,
described as a fight
but
for
one
survival.
testimony
A
from
concerned
Stephen
neighbor couldn't
Neve
ignore
brought
the
up a lot of
disturbing commotion
attention
any
because he
longer.
was
The
romantically
apartment
involved
manager
with
also
Robert.
heard the chaos
Stephen
echoing through
shared
the
that
building.
Robert arrived
Both
at
knew
his
something
home
terrible
about an
was
hour
happening
after the
behind
police
that
first
closed
came
door.
to his house.
They made the decision
When he
that
saw
would
Robert,
expose
he
Robert's
appeared
carefully
sweaty
planned
and
murder.
pretty nervous.
They called
He went straight
911
to
to
Stephen's
report a
house
domestic
after dumping
disturbance.
Tanisha's car
Police
in
were
a parking
dispatched
lot
immediately to
that was a few
investigate
miles
the
away
violent
from
sounds
Stephen's
coming from
apartment.
apartment where a
Robert
church
didn't
elder
mention to
was
Stephen
supposedly
that
living
Tanisha
in
was
marital
missing
bliss.
or what he
When
had
officers
done.
arrived at the Harris
The
apartment,
couple was
the
only
scene that
married
greeted
for a
them
year
told
and had
story
a
of
long business
violence and
relationship
death.
prior
Robert Lee
before he
Harris sat
relocated to be
alone in
with
the aftermath
Tanisha.
of what was clearly
Pastor
a brutal
Carlton
attack.
Frenderburg,
Red
who we all
stains had
probably
soaked
know
deep into
because
the
one of his
carpet,
sermons
creating
went
dark
viral
patches
when
that
he
spoke
called
of
his
life
congregation
spilled
pretty
and
much
lost.
broke and disgusting
Shattered glass
for not
littered the floor
honoring him
like
with a
evidence
luxury
of a desperate
watch.
struggle.
He had a
The
few
apartment
words to
reeked of
share about the
violence.
couple. He
Every
said the couple
surface
was very
seemed to
involved
whisper
with his
secrets
church
of what had
and he never
transpired
saw
in those
signs of their
halls
relationship
just
being in
moments
danger.
before police arrival.
He expressed that
Robert
outside of
remained
church,
calm amid the
Tanisha had
destruction,
worked at a
as
bank
if sitting in
and
a
Robert
room
worked at a
painted with blood
hospital.
was
They
perfectly
each had a
normal.
daughter from
The
previous
contrast was
marriages.
jarring.
The
A
news
man
about
of
the
God
couple
surrounded
is
by evidence of the
devastating for
most
him
unholy
and
act
his
imaginable.
church.
Officers immediately
Tanisha was
recognized they were looking at
described
a crime
as loving
scene,
and
not a
kind,
simple
and
domestic
she would do
dispute.
anything for you.
What disturbed the
She was a
responding
loving
officers
mother and a
most
devoted,
wasn't just
caring
the
wife.
blood or broken
And honestly,
glass.
when I found
It was
out that they
Robert's
both
demeanor.
had,
He
kids,
displayed
I
an
felt really
unnatural
sad
calmness
because
that sent
now they're
chills down their
both
spines.
parentless.
While
You
sitting
would
in a
never
room
think a
that clearly
pastor would
witnessed
even
violence,
murder
he showed
his
no
wife.
signs
And
of
it looked like it was
distress,
honestly
panic, or
premeditated.
concern
And
for
that's
his
very
missing
clear
wife.
to me
His
that,
responses to their
Robert's heart
questions
was
felt
literally
rehearsed,
black.
calculated. He offered explanations that didn't match the severity of the scene around him. Most husbands would be frantic, demanding answers, begging officers to find their wives. Robert Harris sat composed, almost detached, as if discussing someone else's tragedy. His behavior screamed guilt to every trained eye in that room. The officers knew they were looking at a killer, not a victim. Evil was wearing the mask of a concerned spouse. Hours after police left the bloodstained apartment, Robert Harris made his next calculated move. He picked up his phone and dialed 911 again, this time playing the role of a worried husband reporting his wife missing. His voice carried just the right amount of concern, the perfect tone of confusion and fear. But investigators weren't fooled by his performance. The same man who had sat calmly among evidence of violence was now claiming ignorance about his wife's whereabouts. He spun a story about Tanisha leaving for lunch and never returning, conveniently omitting the domestic disturbance call from earlier that day. His lies were crumbling before he even finished telling them. The timeline didn't match his narrative. Overland Park police became suspicious the moment they began interviewing Robert Harris about his wife's disappearance. His story contained holes large enough to drive a truck through. He couldn't explain the blood in their apartment. He couldn't account for the broken glass or the violent sounds neighbors had reported. Most damning of all, he couldn't explain why he had waited hours to report his beloved wife missing. Experienced investigators recognized the classic signs of a guilty suspect trying to cover his tracks. Robert's timeline made no sense. His explanations contradicted physical evidence. His demeanor remained unnaturally calm for a man whose wife had supposedly vanished without a trace. Every answer he gave only deepened their suspicion that they were interviewing a cold-blooded killer, not a concerned husband. The most damning evidence emerged when investigators traced Robert's movements that morning. While Tanisha prepared for what she believed would be another ordinary day, her husband was methodically shopping for murder supplies at Walmart. Security cameras captured him purchasing items that would chill any reasonable person to the bone. A large garbage can, heavy-duty plastic bags, industrial-strength carpet cleaner, a sharp filleting knife designed for cutting through flesh and bone. Each item served a specific purpose in his deadly plan. Robert Harris hadn't snapped in a moment of rage. He had spent the morning carefully selecting the tools he would need to kill his wife and dispose of her body. The Walmart shopping trip destroyed any possibility that Tanisha's murder was a crime of passion. Robert Harris had awakened that morning with murder on his mind and death in his heart. He had calculated every detail, planned every step, and purchased every tool necessary to execute his wife and cover his tracks. This wasn't a husband who lost control during an argument. This wasn't a moment of temporary insanity or overwhelming emotion. This was cold, calculated, premeditated murder carried out by a man who had looked his wife in the eyes that morning knowing he intended to kill her before sunset. The evidence painted a horrifying picture of a predator living among prey. While Tanisha trusted completely, Robert was planning her destruction. While she prepared for another day of serving God and community, he was selecting the instruments of her death. The man who counseled others about the sanctity of marriage had already decided to destroy his own through the most violent means possible. Under the weight of mounting evidence and relentless questioning, Robert Harris's carefully constructed lies finally collapsed. The man who had spent hours playing the role of concerned husband could no longer maintain his facade. Faced with overwhelming proof of his guilt, he made the decision that would seal his fate forever. Robert confessed to his involvement in Tanisha's disappearance. The church elder who had counseled others about truth and righteousness finally admitted to the most unholy act imaginable. But his confession wasn't born from remorse or guilt. It was a calculated move to potentially reduce his punishment. Evil was still trying to manipulate the system. Robert's cooperation led investigators 20 miles away from their Overland Park apartment to a desolate field in Raymore, Missouri. This remote location had been carefully chosen, far enough from home to avoid immediate discovery, isolated enough to hide his horrific crime from the world. The field stretched endlessly under gray January skies, its barren landscape now serving as Tanisha's temporary grave. Investigators combed through the area, following Robert's directions to the spot where he had dumped his wife's body like discarded trash. The distance he had traveled to dispose of her remains revealed the calculated nature of his crime. He had planned not just her murder, but every detail of concealing it from those who loved her most. When investigators reached the location Robert had described, they discovered the most heartbreaking sight imaginable. Tanisha Harris, the beloved associate minister who had touched countless lives with her compassion and faith, had been reduced to a discarded object wrapped in black plastic garbage bags. The woman who had preached about human dignity and the sanctity of life had been treated like refuse by the man who had promised to love and protect her. Robert had used the very bags he purchased that morning at Walmart to conceal his wife's body from the world. Seeing Tanisha's remains enclosed in those dark plastic bags drove home the calculated cruelty of her husband's actions. She deserved so much more than this undignified end to a life dedicated to serving others and spreading God's love. The autopsy revealed the full horror of Tanisha's final moments on earth. The medical examiner determined that she had died by strangulation, a deeply personal and violent method of murder that required Robert to look into her eyes as he squeezed the life from her body. But the strangulation wasn't the only evidence of brutality. Tanisha's body showed additional signs of physical trauma, indicating she had fought desperately for her life. The woman who had spent her days bringing peace to others had experienced unimaginable violence in her final moments. Her husband hadn't just killed her, he had tortured her, making her death as cruel and painful as possible before finally ending her suffering. The revelation that Robert Harris had murdered his wife sent shockwaves through both the banking community and Repair's Kansas City congregation. Members who had trusted him with their deepest secrets, their spiritual guidance, and their most vulnerable moments struggled to comprehend the truth. How could the man they had turned to for counsel be capable of such evil? How could someone who preached about love and forgiveness strangle his own wife to death? The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Church members questioned everything they thought they knew about faith, trust, and human nature. Their spiritual leader had become their worst nightmare, shattering their sense of safety and security within their sacred community forever. Minister Hope Lizette's words captured the devastating betrayal felt by the entire congregation. "It's beyond unreal because I knew Elder Robert Harris," she told reporters, her voice heavy with disbelief and pain. "He was my spiritual counselor. He was our go-to-man when we couldn't reach our pastor. He loved her." Her testimony revealed the depth of trust Robert had violated. This wasn't just any church member. He was the person they called during spiritual emergencies, the man they believed spoke with God's wisdom. Hope Lizette had confided in a killer, sought guidance from a murderer, trusted completely in someone capable of ultimate evil. The man who had relocated across the country for love had actually moved to establish the perfect hunting ground. The church elder who counseled troubled marriages had been planning to destroy his own through murder. The spiritual leader who preached about the sanctity of life had been calculating how to end his wife's existence. Robert Harris had weaponized his position of trust and authority. He used his role as elder to gain access to vulnerable people, to establish himself as trustworthy and godly, all while harboring the capacity for ultimate evil. His entire persona had been a carefully constructed mask designed to hide his true nature. The congregation realized they had been living with a predator disguised as a protector. They had sought spiritual guidance from someone whose soul was consumed by darkness. The man they had believed was closest to God had actually been furthest from everything holy and sacred. Their faith in human goodness lay shattered alongside their trust. In August 2018, justice finally arrived for Tanisha Harris. After months of legal proceedings, a jury delivered the verdict that her family, friends, and community had been desperately waiting to hear. Robert Lee Harris was found guilty of first-degree murder in the brutal killing of his wife. The conviction represented more than just legal justice. It was validation that Tanisha's life had mattered, that her death would not go unpunished. The jury had seen through Robert's lies and manipulation, recognizing him for what he truly was, a cold-blooded killer who had betrayed the most sacred trust imaginable. The man who had once counseled others about righteousness now faced the full weight of earthly justice for his unholy crimes. On Thursday, the judge delivered the sentence that would define the rest of Robert Harris's existence. 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole, effectively a life sentence for the 35-year-old killer. He would spend every remaining day of his life behind bars, paying for the 18 months of marriage he had ended with violence. The sentence meant Robert would never again walk free, never again have the opportunity to manipulate or harm another innocent person. While Tanisha's life had been cut tragically short, her killer would live out his days in a concrete cage, stripped of the freedom and respect he had once enjoyed. Pastor Carlton Funderburk struggled to reconcile the man he had known with the monster who had been revealed. Utter shock, anguish, confusion, and questions. He described his emotional state following the conviction. The pastor who had joyfully performed their wedding ceremony in July 2016 now grappled with the devastating reality of what that union had become. Funderburk had believed he was joining two souls in holy matrimony, blessing a love that would honor God and inspire their community. Instead, he had unknowingly officiated the beginning of Tanisha's countdown to death. The weight of that realization haunted him, challenging everything he thought he understood about human nature, faith, and the people he had trusted most. The Repairers Kansas City congregation faced an impossible task, rebuilding their faith after discovering evil had lived among them disguised as righteousness. Members questioned their ability to trust again, wondering if other wolves might be hiding in sheep's clothing within their sacred community. Support groups formed as congregants processed their trauma together. Some members left the church entirely, unable to worship in the same sanctuary where Robert had once led prayers and offered counsel. Others doubled down on their faith, determined not to let one man's evil destroy their relationship with God. The healing process would take years, perhaps decades. Every sermon about trust, every lesson about marriage, every discussion about spiritual leadership now carried the weight of Tanisha's memory and the betrayal they had all experienced together. Tanisha's daughter lost not only her beloved mother, but also her sense of safety in the world. The church family that had once provided comfort and guidance now served as a reminder of how trust could be weaponized by evil. Robert's own daughter faced the devastating reality that her father was a killer, forever marked by his crimes. Repairers Kansas City implemented new safeguards and counseling protocols, determined to protect their members from future predators. The congregation learned painful lessons about the difference between spiritual authority and genuine character. Tanisha's legacy became a call for vigilance, a reminder that evil can wear the most convincing masks and speak the most beautiful words about faith and love. The tragedy of Tanisha Harris teaches us that evil doesn't announce itself with obvious warning signs. Robert's mask of righteousness was so convincing that even trained spiritual leaders couldn't see through his deception. However, looking back with the clarity that hindsight provides, certain patterns emerge that could have saved Tanisha's life if recognized earlier. The most dangerous predators are often those who deliberately seek positions of trust and authority, using their status to disarm potential victims and silence suspicion. One of the most critical red flags in any relationship involves isolation tactics, disguised as devotion. When someone relocates across the country for love, it can seem romantic, but it also removes the person from their support network and familiar environment. Abusers often encourage their victims to distance themselves from family and friends who might recognize warning signs or offer alternative perspectives. Robert's relocation to Kansas City may have seemed like the ultimate romantic gesture, but it also positioned him perfectly to control Tanisha's environment and relationships. Religious communities must implement stronger safeguards to protect their most vulnerable members. Background checks should be mandatory for anyone seeking leadership positions, regardless of their apparent spiritual maturity or charismatic personality. Churches should establish clear protocols for reporting concerns about leaders, ensuring that members feel safe speaking up without fear of retaliation or disbelief. Multiple accountability partners should oversee those in authority, and no single person should have unchecked access to counseling situations or private information about congregants. The warning signs of domestic violence often hide behind closed doors, making them difficult for outsiders to detect. However, certain behaviors should trigger immediate concern. Excessive control over a partner's schedule or activities, isolation from family and friends, financial manipulation, and any history of violence or threats. In religious settings, abusers may weaponize scripture or spiritual concepts to justify their control, claiming divine authority over their victims. Communities must educate members about these tactics and create safe spaces for reporting concerns. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, resources are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The National Domestic Violence Hotline can be reached at 1-800-799-7233, offering confidential support and safety planning. Local law enforcement agencies have specialized domestic violence units trained to handle these sensitive situations. Many communities also offer safe houses and legal advocacy services for victims seeking to escape dangerous relationships. Perhaps the most important lesson from Tanisha's story is the critical importance of trusting our instincts over appearances. When something feels wrong, when behavior doesn't match words, when gut feelings scream danger despite surface-level normalcy, we must listen to those internal warning systems. Tanisha's colleagues and friends felt that overwhelming sense of dread when she disappeared, their intuition recognizing the truth before their minds could process it. Our subconscious often picks up on subtle cues that our conscious mind hasn't yet identified. Authority figures who demand unquestioning trust should be viewed with healthy skepticism. True spiritual leaders welcome accountability and transparency, understanding that their positions require higher standards of conduct. Anyone who becomes defensive when questioned, who discourages outside relationships, or who uses their authority to silence concerns is displaying classic predatory behavior. Trust should be earned through consistent actions over time, not granted automatically based on titles or positions. If this story opened your eyes to the dangers that can hide behind trusted faces, please share it to help protect others. Subscribe for more true crime stories that could save lives. And remember, your safety matters more than anyone's reputation. What warning signs do you think people should watch for? Let us know in the comments below. Together, we can create communities where predators cannot hide behind masks of respectability, where victims feel safe to speak up, and where tragedies like Tanisha's become truly preventable through awareness, education, and unwavering vigilance.